Speaking of endearing, here's our endearing panel moderator, the only man who can make a simple explanation of this panel sound like a whole page from Webster's Unabridged Dictionary, Mr. John Charles Daly.
Okay. When I would come to you for this service, would you...
I would say it's a service you could use, given all of the other considerations that you were in the area and would require the particular service available to you in the particular place where Mr. Guthrie purveys the service.
Don't forget, we promised to be forgiving.
1963.
Well, now, John, let me put it this way. Suppose I were in the area, and with all due consideration for the fact that I might be in the area where that service might be performed, might it be possible for me, within the province of the question I'm about to ask, to... No, I can't do it. You're the master.
Can it be bought in a department store?
Yes.
I think it's only fair to say that we are dealing here with a product which, the identification of which you are seeking, which may have at one stage or another different identifications. And under one or another of these identifications, there would be a relationship to a department store, yes.
John, you know I haven't been well.
You won't get better at this rate.
They're not healing me at all.
Is it, therefore, for the good of man?
Well, this is a very broad term that you've applied here, David. I would think that to the degree that you can assess the value that might obtain to the individual from the proper utilization of the service which is under discussion.
He's throwing you off.
We would have to agree that this was for the betterment of man to the degree that it improves a sense of well-being or is a receiving terminology for enjoyment of one kind or another.
Well, I can't even remember what I asked now.
But you wouldn't directly have the service. Mr. Lawrence?
You're sure?
Yeah, I'm sure.
This service that you perform, do you perform it for or to people?
Yes.
This is where we get into the gray area again, because the service is in its direct
there seemed to be some question
application.
about Dorothy.
Well, this is what I was trying to
available.
say, Steve. In the direct application of the specific service, people would not necessarily be involved. At the same time, there is a set of circumstances which, if they are obtained, would reasonably allow you to state that people do get some benefit of a service which is delivered as a result of the application of the talents of Miss Vankovich.
I had less trouble understanding Yogi Berra.
Does it move in any direction you decide yourself?
Yes.
Well, I would say that the latitude that is given to you to decide which direction that it's going to move in is to some degree controlled, but certainly you would concur in the decision as to the direction in which it was to go, based certainly on the other factors of which you had taken full account.
Did you say something?
No.
Is there any degree of survival involved in having this particular service?
Well, I would say this, that only to the degree that, danger is inherent in crossing the street, etc. If you have the service which is available to you from Mr. Guilfoyle, it certainly could affect the survivability factor as it might subsequently be applied to any actions which you might indulge in as a result of the service.
Yes, but what I was asking was...
Does what you do in the way of service take less than an hour?
Sometimes. Now, to beat an old cliche to death and to go back to your previous question, you know, no man is an island. I trust that the question that you asked previously understands that all of us tend to have the cooperation of our fellows in almost any action which we take. This is not suggesting that in giving you the affirmative answer to the question next precedent to the one you just asked, that our guest works entirely alone. There are other people involved generally in what is going on.
May we have the next guest?
Do people come to you for your service?
Not necessarily.
They could?
Yes. Yes.
They could, John, in case you were about to give me a no.
Yeah, I was about to give you a no. I would say that is fair. We would have to assume that in coming specifically to the particularities of the service which these two gentlemen do offer, that in some instances individuals would come to them to seek some element of that particular element of the service that they might be particularly interested in.
You talked so long, they've already been promoted. Except that I like to hear you, John, even if I don't know what you're saying.
Is it something that's seasonal in its use?
Yes. Well, here I would say, with your permission, that much would depend on the subjective attitude of the potential user. We would agree that there is a possibility that one time of the year might suggest itself as a more salubrious climate for the use. But this does not bar or rule out its use over a full 12 months period. Is that right, Mr.?
My family told me that my education, such as it was, would come in useful one day, but you've outmatched me, John. The salubrious, you sure? Would you explain in what connection you've told
Well, I was merely trying to point out that while you, I thought, were seeking some definition of periods of use with your question.
Periodicity.
Periodicity. The seasonal factor, while it might have some effect upon the degree of use, does not necessarily inhibit use at any time.
When it is used by the person, would it be used from the waist up? Anywhere in the region of the body from the waist up, I should say.
Well, I think here we have to qualify the answer and say when it was in use by the individual, it certainly in some periods of its use could be described as being located in an area generally having to do with that area of the individual from the waist up.
Therefore, it could also perhaps find its way to the lower part of the body as well.
I think it would be fair to say that, again, depending entirely on the will and the whim of the individual, it might be used in relationship to areas contiguous to those areas to be described as the lower portions of the human anatomy.
After all of that, is there anything pleasurable in this miserable thing?
Yes, indeed.
It is not likely to be stationary. It is more likely to be moved around.
That is right.
May I assume that it does not move around by itself, of its own volition?
You want to go snipe hunting with me? Dorothy, what do you think on this? We're going to have another meeting. Well, let me put it this way. I would, on technicalities, tend to say that the answer should be no. Mr. Oates said that I think we would possibly mislead them if we did not say yes to this. Now, this should indicate to you that what we're suggesting here in the issue of whether it moves around on its own volition or not is being decided fundamentally in a most modern sense.
John, if I may interrupt, in all respect, the gap between the question and the answer is so long that my defective concentration, does it move by itself or not?
Well, in the most modern... We're answering the question affirmatively, but in the context of modern technology. Let's put it that way.